Hi, and welcome to another video about my author journey. There has been a lot of questions and discussions for me about things that I have learned on the way to becoming an author the first time, and the second, and now the third time with my upcoming book launch of Coffee and Paper Cuts. And so one of the things I wanted to talk to you today is about my writing process. Now, obviously, the process and my author journey to becoming published begins with my own process as an author. And so when I write, I make sure that I always have a notebook with me. Now, this is a very old habit, a habit begun maybe in teenage years or, as long as I can remember. I've always had something to write with and something to write on. Sometimes that combination is a little bit more organized than others. Sometimes I have a highlighter to make sure that the process is even colorful or has the keywords highlighted and things like that. But in general, I try to make sure that I take note or that I write down or text to myself or email to myself when a good or interesting or, kind of capturing idea comes to my head. You'll hear lots of kind of stories of writers who keep a notebook by the bed in case they get an idea in their sleep or get an idea right before sleep or right after sleep and they don't want to lose it. This is where this habit comes into play for mine. I always have some kind of notebook somewhere where I write down casual ideas to play around with later. This is because a lot of the ideas that I have for poetry or stories or writing won't leave me alone until I do that. Like they'll play on my mind, like you get an earworm from a song, or like you get that nagging notion that you're supposed to be doing something. A lot of my poetry ideas or my writing ideas will do that to me until I, at the very least, write down the title of what I'm thinking for the poem or some kind of short couple of line sketch on what I have as a basic idea for the poem. And sometimes it never appears. Sometimes I never get back to it, or once I do get back to it, it's not as good of an idea as I think it will be. But I always at least try to take note of that thing. Now, this applies to just as much to my older work as to my newer work. But I also remember I didn't know I was going to create an entire book based on my trip to Rome. Like I didn't know Chasing Apollo was going to exist, but when I was in Rome, I knew that the countryside and the atmosphere and the things that I was going to see and the things I was going to do were going to evoke strong feelings and create strong memories. And so I was reasonably sure that some kind of poetry and some kind of writing or creativity was going to come from it. And so I would kind of take a short note of things that happened to me that day or funny things that I thought of during the day, either on my phone, and then I'd transfer them to my computer so that I just had some basic notes. I think I called the file something like things I learned in Rome today or something like that to kind of just keep track of anything I might want to use later. And so when I created Chasing Apollo as an author, which I did based off of my memories and photographs from Rome, I used those notes to help me make sure I didn't forget anything, that I was using the photographs of what I saw, the memories that I had, and the notes that I took to make sure that some of the more entertaining or interesting ideas didn't slip through the cracks. So that was part of my kind of self-editing process. Another thing that I want to talk to you about my own writing process as an author is visceral writing and where you first put your words. So whether I'm writing fiction or poetry, I like to handwrite things, whether on an A4, in an A4 notebook or an A5 notebook or whatever I happen to have to hand, or if I'm organized enough, the A4 will do because I can write all over that. I like to handwrite things first because my writing can get messy until I nail down the idea. And I like to be able to scribble it out physically when I'm not happy with it, or crosswords out, or rewrite a line, or create a chorus and then just use an asterisk. I don't know what it is about physically writing the poem first, or the piece of writing first, but I very rarely just type it straight without the physical writing stage in between. I keep the drafts, I keep folders of, the things and where they belong, and what bit or project they belong to. But part of the reason why is that's my first editing phase. I have it physically written on the page because I know I'm going to type it up later anyway. It can be as messy as I want it to be. And so physically on the page, I go through the first edit after I finished nabbing the idea and nailing it to the page on a basic level. I go through and I try to refine it. And so then later, when I've had time to process it and think about it and live with it a little bit, then I type it onto the computer. And this is only partially because that filtering process helps improve the writing. It's also because when I was very, very young and first started actually typing my poems, I didn't keep hard copy. And like all computers in the 80s and 90s, they were not necessarily reliable. And I have memories of losing my poetry file, or getting corrupted, or being destroyed, or in some way I lost a ton of poetry that I can't even remember because I lost the computer file. So I started keeping this redundant process where I would have the handwritten draft, type it into the computer, and then when I was happy with it, I would keep a hard copy of the most recent draft. So that all allows me to kind of physically interact with my words, physically interact with the drafts. And when it comes time to put it into a collection, I found that the printed out versions of the poetry were easy to move around and rearrange and try to find a thematic order, or an order that kind of ebbed and flowed in the variety collections that made sense. So having that physical copy was important to me. I know that keeping it digitally as a backup is also wise, but this process of editing and where we edit and when we edit is a decision that every author has to make. So I made my decisions about how I was going to write in the first instance, how I was going to capture ideas, and then what made the most sense to me in terms of the first draft, second, third, whatever, in refining it. So after you do actually become published, and after, or at least for me, after I became published, one of the strangest experiences was going through an editor. Now, I had friends read my work before, and I am an English teacher, so I know a lot of people who know what they're talking about in terms of writing and technical and grammar and poetry and that kind of thing. So my beta readers tend to have a different kind of educational level and knowledge of it, even if they're not writers or authors themselves. So I always had my test audience and my friends that I trust to tell me the truth and to be honest about whether something's working or not working. And many of them have beta read all three of my books, which I'm very, very grateful for, because I need to fight my own imposter syndrome and feel like it should be out there, that it has worth and meaning, and that there is a point to me putting it out there to achieve my purpose of sharing emotions and experiences with other people. So as part of my author journey, I ask my beta readers to read it first, then I submit it to my publisher. My publisher does her pass and passes it on to an editor. Like a couple of the other videos that I was talking about, talking to your publisher, establishing that you're all on the same page is as important with every other designer, editor, creator, or person who is helping you make the idea into the finished book. I have had great experiences with all of the team that work with Danny Blackner at Conscious Dreams Publishing, but I did have a conflict with some of the edits that have been added to my work or taken away from my work over time. Some of it, I think, is from a pure misunderstanding of what I was trying to do or what I was after. And as an artist, I had never before experienced that kind of like, you know, temperamental artist where I would get angry at what somebody was saying about my work or what somebody was suggesting I do with my work or changes that somebody was suggesting I do with particular poems or parts of the poems. And I just got really frustrated and really angry. And so it took me longer to go through the notes because I found the notes frustrating because I felt like they didn't get what I was going for. And obviously, it's a piece of art, it's a creation, and poetry is worse for that than even some prose. Novels, short stories, other types of writing where it's all full sentences, there are grammar rules, and you follow the grammar rule or it's incorrect, and that's what an editor is for. And typos, really blatant, obvious typos, are easier to spot in a place where you're not doing a play on words. And so keeping that communication and accepting that in poetry, it might not be quite so obvious. And in poetry, the grammar rules don't always apply. And a pattern that you think might be there might not actually be there, or it's a pattern I put in that I didn't realize I put in. All of these things are involved in more professional level editing, not my own editing of trying to make it good, not my beta readers editing and trying to give me an honest critique and constructive criticism, but the kind of nitty gritty down to it. Should this comma be here? Or should this semicolon be here? I don't believe that there are, the syllables don't match or the line break doesn't match. And it, like, as a poet, that was very difficult for me to deal with. And I've never been the like temperamental artist before. So that was a new experience and part of my author journey. Something that kind of makes me laugh when I think about some of my temper tantrums when reading the notes. So, be kind to your team, talk to them and make sure that you're all on the same team. All the people working with you to create your book all have the best of intentions. They're getting paid to do it, but they're also, not going to want to sandbag you. That's not how cooperative creation works. So after getting through those stages, my own self editing, the beta readers, and then the professional, then it becomes part of the branding and style and the cover art. Now I'm doing separate videos on the art that I have, the illustrations and how I create my illustrations. Those are on Wednesdays. So if you want to check that out, that would be great. But I did the same thing with the cover, use the same program with the cover as I did for the illustrations. So check those out and you'll hear a little bit more about how I did that. But the font and the style and the placement of the font and the placement of the titles and subtitles and all of those things are all decisions that you have to edit and really consider what you want to keep. Now, I was very lucky in my first choice, my first book, the font that I chose and the placement on my book cover, the style of the font on the inside, the style of the font on the back, all of these decisions that I made for my first book, I was so happy with that I decided to use that as my branding. And so the styles and the fonts and the colors and all of those things, that just became more natural the second time and then the third time. And so those kind of happy accidents, lucky things that happen were really beneficial. But it then became an active decision to make sure that my branding was the same, that my style was the same, so that when you see the book and the 3 books together, you can tell, even without seeing my name at the bottom, that those are written by the same person, or at least they are related to each other in terms of branding. So I think that's all I really have to talk about today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my author journey and in my next video. But the last thing I want to talk about is the background that you see. And I know it's really strange. I've tried actually filming in the location, but there was a sound issue with trying to do that. So I wanted to share it with you anyway, with some of the pictures that I've taken from being there. Once a week, as part of my writing process that I've talked about before, I go to this place called Birdie's Bar. Now, Birdie's Bar has live music on a Thursday night. the crowd and the liveliness is very variable, but it's a wonderful place and very creative and inspiring in terms of atmosphere. And I enjoy it. And it's my part of my process is I know I will write down and sketch down ideas all week long, but one day a week, or almost every week, I try to be at my Thursday night at Birdie's. And because of that, this atmosphere you see behind me is where I'm going to be having my book launch for my third collection. So I'd love to see you here or there, or however you want to put it, at Birdie's Bar on May 22nd. We're really coming down to it now. The book launch is a week Sunday. So on the 22nd of May, I will be sharing with you more of my poetry, more of my work, some music, some drinks, and a competition, which I talk about on Wednesdays, where I'm asking you to send in a poem that is 20 lines or less about any of the content I'm putting on during the week, something that you're inspired by, to submit to my email, and I will announce the winner of a free copy of my book on the book launch day. So please follow the links. I am on Linktree, and I have lots of material on all of my platforms. Follow the link to register for a free ticket to my book launch and come and talk poetry with me, talk author with me, talk illustrating with me. Mostly just talk about, creation and enjoying the expression that we all find when we do these kinds of things. So thank you for listening, and follow the links, and I will see you on the 22nd.